YouTube, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Rob Cam, and welcome back to the Rob Cam Show. In this one, we got another reaction video coming at you from Russell Gifts, and this is the WWE draft used to be special, which it actually used to be. So let's hear his take on how the draft used to be special, like how it was back in the day. As always, subscribe to his channel, leave a like on the video, like I did right there. Subscribe to Rob Cam, leave a like on this video, and share it to your friends. Without further ado, let's get straight into it.
Is over, and in just a few days the WWE is about to shake things up with the annual draft, the two-night event where wrestlers are sent from one show to another, new storylines and feuds are made possible. And I gotta say, as a kid who grew up in the 2000s watching wrestling, I used to love the draft. WWE Draft Night used to be a special night, and it all began all the way back in March of 2002 with the first ever draft. This was a night where the brand split that so many of us grew up with officially began. In 2002, for the first time ever, the WWE decided to split their rosters across two shows, Raw and SmackDown. With Ric Flair as the kayfabe owner of Raw and Vince as the owner of SmackDown, the first draft took place 22 years ago, and it is a trip to look back at. First off, it is so clear watching this back and even doing a tiny bit of research that the company had absolutely zero idea on what the hell they were doing. For 2 hours on an episode of Raw, they had Flair and Vince take turns making selections for their show, drafting a roster from scratch. And this draft is hilarious because other than the top stars like Rock and Taker, who were the first two picks, 95% of the roster had no idea where the hell they were going. The talent was finding out their future the same time the fans were live on television. So on this episode of Raw, the entire roster is just sitting there being filmed, filled with anxiety, not knowing where the hell they're going to be wrestling next week, where their traveling buddies and friends are going to go, and in some cases where their significant others are going to be. So during their show, when the Dudleys get split up across the two shows, their reaction on TV was their genuine reaction on finding out that they're finally going their separate ways. But despite that, this draft was memorable for many reasons. The Rock going first overall to SmackDown, of course he had to go to SmackDown, and just roasting Vince, Undertaker being pissed off for being drafted by the guy who he just beat up at WrestleMania a week before this, and most importantly for them having Ric Flair draft the stupidest Raw roster you could have possibly imagined. SmackDown's roster cleared the Raw roster by so much it didn't make any sense. SmackDown was out here getting wrestlers like The Rock, Angle, Benoit, Hogan, and Edge. Meanwhile, Raw was getting heel Undertaker, washed up NWO going second overall without Hogan and Kane, which it's fine, but like, really? Thank God they got RVD, but yo, imagine RVD on the O2 SmackDown roster. But yeah, no, the draft was super unbalanced and just all over the place, and the company knew it because by the end of O2, the whole rosters got flipped upside down anyway. And just to make everything seem even more of a mess, Austin, who was so fed up with his booking at this point, didn't even bother to show up to be drafted on Raw, so they had to make this whole storyline up of how he was somehow a free agent, but nobody else was. Meanwhile, poor Chris Jericho, who was the world champion 8 days prior to the draft, he didn't even get drafted on TV. He had to wait for his selection to be published on WWE.com after the show to find out where the hell he was going. And mind you, this was 2002. There was no internet at Starbucks. The O2 draft was a mess in every way and did not reflect what Raw and SmackDown ended up becoming in any way. But when I think of the O2 draft, I get nothing but warm and fuzzy feelings because personally, I think of SmackDown Shut Your Mouth on the PS2. Because that game season mode actually starts at the draft and you're able to replay and recreate the entire draft however you want it to be. And it is crazy to this day how well they replicated it. But yeah, despite this being a mess and despite them having absolutely zero planning, it is definitely without a doubt an iconic episode of Raw. I wish I was a little bit older so I could have watched this live because I can imagine how exciting this was at the time. But hey, this draft and brand split, this is what started it all. We move on to the 2004 draft, and this night was infamous. What was so special about this night was since 2002, for the most part, once the rosters got drafted, Raw and SmackDown rarely ever interacted. It was like the Bloods and Crips out here. The brands were so clearly divided with no interaction whatsoever. Just the idea of a
Yeah, the Bloods and Crips is crazy, and it's
SmackDown
accurate.
guy pulling up to Raw for like a huge deal. So to have all the SmackDown guys pull up to Raw for one night, it was like, whoa. And in terms of the actual drafts, none of the selections really changed the game. Instead, poor SmackDown just kind of got pillaged. Yeah, we're gonna take Shelton, Benjamin, and Edge, and here, you can have Mark Jindrak. I don't even think Mark Jindrak's mom wanted him back in 2004. But this night is infamous for one pick. In the middle of the show, it was time for SmackDown to make a selection, and John Cena comes out and does a rap and basically calls both Bischoff and Heyman, who were the general managers, jackasses. Cena selects a draft pick for SmackDown and leaves. He gives it to Heyman, and Heyman starts complaining like, "Hey, this pick isn't legit. I'm not using this." And Bischoff demands he takes it. Heyman complains, but he slowly opens it up and reads it. He slowly stops speaking and says, "Are you sure you want me to take this draft pick?" Eric Bischoff says yes, and he announces to the world the pick is Triple H. Triple H gets drafted to SmackDown after 2 years of raining down terror. I mean, terrorist attacks on the Raw roster. The game was SmackDown bound, and it was like, what the hell? Because there was no one, especially back in 2004, there was no one who was more of a Raw wrestler in 2004 than Triple H. But nah, it didn't matter. Get ready to learn UPN, buddy. He's going to SmackDown, and this episode of Raw ends in one of the coolest main events I've ever seen live. Eddie Guerrero versus Triple H for the WWE title, and for some reason, this is a match that I think growing up, I probably watched over 100 times on YouTube in shitty 240p quality. Now trust me, back in the day this match definitely went platinum in the hood on YouTube, and it's just because of how much a trip this match was. Triple H in a SmackDown shirt taking on Eddie Guerrero for the first and last time a week after WrestleMania 20, and the match ends in a giant brawl and everyone's just tweaking. Raw and SmackDown, blue shirts everywhere, red shirts everywhere, Austin pulling up in his ATV. A great match, a great spectacle, an awesome ending for an awesome show, and like, yeah, this had 7-year-old me on YouTube in a chokehold. Sadly, Triple H didn't want to work Tuesdays, so he never went to SmackDown and got traded back, but nonetheless, a classic draft episode. Moving on to the 2005 draft, this is probably my favorite and the one that is most ingrained in my brain because I vividly remember as a kid watching every single episode and seeing every single selection live over a month.
I'm sorry, the music got me hyped. I'm in this beautiful terror, got a head for this best, when I grab your umbrella, I'll make it. Sorry.
Yeah, this was a draft that didn't take place on one night and actually took place over the course of a month, and as a result, it just made everything so fire. I will never forget watching Raw. I'm like 7 years old, and SmackDown was definitely my favorite show at the time because my boy Cena was on it, and the first draft selection ends up being John Cena, who comes out to open up Monday Night Raw, and when I tell you I was jumping for joy and screaming and going crazy just because Cena was on my TV on a Monday, I'm not joking. Probably the most fond wrestling memory I have because of how young I was and how much the surprise caught me off guard. And every episode after that, Raw, SmackDown, didn't matter. It was like, whoa, who's gonna get drafted? And what made it so crazy was it wasn't idiots like Spike Dudley getting drafted or something. Nah, you tune into Raw, Cena comes out and he's beefing Jericho. Next week on Raw, Kurt Angle is in the cut. Meanwhile, on SmackDown, Randy Orton is interfering in the main event. It was top tier talent making the switch. But the coolest moment for sure, other than Cena being drafted to Raw, was definitely when the World Heavyweight Champion went over to SmackDown. See, since Cena left to Raw, so did the championship with him, and as a result, SmackDown was left without a world title. So as the draft was going on, they actually had the storyline where a new SmackDown championship was going to be created, and they had a 5-man match that went 44 minutes, and at the end, JBL won the match and was going to be crowned. Until we found out that the last pick of the draft was Batista, who comes out with the world title, officially joins SmackDown, and as much as I love one-night draft nights, especially the ones that came after this month-long draft was just so special. It was big jumping shows. Every week felt
a month. That's basically like what did he do? The transfer window that they've been doing. That I feel like it's still going on, but ended after the what is that? The Royal Rumble. But I feel like the transfer window is still going on to this day. I don't know. Yo, this game, classic. Classito.
Massive, and yeah, it set up the next 2 years perfectly. Truly a special time. 06 didn't really have a draft. Instead, because ECW was becoming a third brand, they had Paul Heyman stand in the ring and just gave him 2 selections, and he was able to select any 2 wrestlers he wanted, and he chose Kurt Angle, which was a great pick, and then he chose The Big Show. Yeah, because if I could choose any wrestler on the roster, I'm choosing this. I hate The Big Show. Anyway, 07 was a return to form, and it was back to being a special one-night event. And this was an episode that I remember being really hyped for back in the day. It was a special 3-hour episode of Raw, and wrestlers from all 3 brands were gonna appear, and this time, draft picks were actually up for grabs through matches. So when Edge defeated Cena, that meant SmackDown got 1 draft pick. First of all, I almost threw up in my mouth saying that. Second, how could you not be hyped as a 9-year-old tuning into Raw? And not only are there draft picks and wrestlers changing brands, we're out here getting Cena versus Edge on free television. We also got probably the most random triple threat you could imagine. Batista versus Jeff Hardy versus Elijah Burke. My mind can't compute that. It doesn't make sense. The whole idea of the night was perfect. It was really hyped up and really well done. The whole format change and everything was perfect. The only issue was, nobody of note got drafted. Yo, do you know how deflating it was as someone who always prefers SmackDown over Raw, sitting through matches like The Miz versus Snitsky just to see SmackDown get a pick and being all excited, and the pick ends up being Chris Masters in 2007? Like, yo, what are we doing here? I mean, Chris Benoit got drafted to ECW. And nothing was ever the same again. Good planning, good ideas, just not good draft picks. If anything, the most memorable moment of the night was Vince McMahon getting drafted to hell. But it's all good because the company took the '07 approach and came back with it again in 2008. And
Yo, I remember that shit. Yo, when that limo blew up, I thought the man, I was a kid, so I thought he actually died. And then Chris Benoit actually died that week. No, wait. Yeah, he died. Vince blew up in that limousine on a Monday. I think they had the tribute. No, he blew up the following Monday, the previous Monday, and then the next Monday they had a tribute to Benoit. So it was like literally this. All that played out within a span of 2 weeks or a week. That shit was crazy.
just say they heard all the chatter about nothing important happening and they went nuts in '08. The 2008 draft is one of the most memorable nights of television I have ever seen live. This was an awesome night. This was also such a fun watch for me back in the day because it also happened to be the first day of summer vacation, so all my friends came over and we all watched it together, and it seemed like every single pick had us going insane, for better or for worse. See, by 2008, we had like 6 years of the brand split, and there were so many wrestlers who in our brains were ingrained as SmackDown guys or as Raw guys. Just the thought of them switching shows made us feel uncomfortable. So when the '08 draft happened and it started and Rey Mysterio got drafted from Raw to SmackDown, to say my skin was crawling would be an understatement. Once the graphic showed up on the screen, a part of me died that night. Rey Mysterio on Raw just felt wrong. It felt disgusting. It felt illegal. It was like seeing Dwayne Wade on the Cavaliers in 2017. And the worst part was, this was just the beginning. The night was just filled with surprises and surprises because right after this, Finlay won a match and got Jeff Hardy drafted to SmackDown, which, as you know, the rest was history. But even in that moment, Jeff on SmackDown, it just felt like a match made in heaven. CM Punk finally glowed up from ECW, Batista got sent back to Raw, and on any other night, this would have had us tripping. But yeah, once Ray was gone, at this point we were numb. Or so we thought. Nothing could have prepared us for when Michael Cole and Jim Ross had to switch places. That moment is so insane because JR and Cole didn't know they were moving shows, so when you're watching this, you see them get drafted for one another. Poor JR, it looked like he wanted to end it all on live TV, because when this happened, he basically got demoted on live TV. Jim Ross not being the Raw commentator, and at that time, Michael Cole not being the SmackDown commentator, it felt disgusting. From the first time I ever watched wrestling back in '02, '03, all I knew was Jim Ross called Raw, Cole called SmackDown, and now it was mumbo jumbo. It's like, well, what are we gonna do? Poor King, he doesn't have JR anymore. How's he gonna be? Everything.
I forgot that was the start to it. I forgot they had got drafted for each other. I remember that now. That shit was funny. He just like they were just like, what the hell? And then I think that's when obviously they put Michael Cole to this day in the as the lead commentator for everything, basically almost everything. And Jim Ross is now in AEW. And yeah, AEW is AEW. It is what it is.
Everything I knew was gone, and just everything I knew, everything that made me feel warm and cozy as a wrestling fan at that point for my whole childhood, everything got messed up on this night. Rey Mysterio's now on Raw, Batista's going back to Raw, Jim Ross is on SmackDown. What is this? And to cap it all off, Edge eliminated Cena to win a battle royal in the main event for a draft pick, and he ended up getting Triple H drafted to SmackDown. Talk about wrong, talk about feeling uncomfortable. The same man who just a few minutes ago in the same video I talked about how he embodied Raw like no one else back in '04, now in '08 he was actually going to SmackDown for real this time. This draft changed everything. The Raws and SmackDowns we knew for so many years that we grew up on, that I grew up on, it was done. This was a new era, and it's so funny how these brands and wrestlers being on a certain show just meant so much to us back in the day as kids. It's like there's no way in hell that kids these days care that much if Cody Rhodes is on Raw or if he's on SmackDown. But it was still real to us, damn it. A super memorable night, a night that I'll never forget, a really fun night, the night.
He's not lying. The draft when I was a kid used to be very exciting to watch, very eventful. It was like the funniest shit still, he probably gonna say in the video, is still when John Cena got drafted to SmackDown and then back to Raw. I was like, the hell? Because I was tight he got drafted to SmackDown. I'm like, damn. And niggas at the end of the show, nigga got drafted back to fucking the I should say my dude got drafted back to his flagship show.
That really changed everything. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Vince McMahon died again. Yo, what is wrong with this guy trying to die or fake his death every draft night? The next year in 2009, they ran the draft back the same way, and what's funny is they low-key kind of reversed everything they did the year prior. Yeah, Triple H on SmackDown is not it anymore. Let's get him back to Raw. Rey Mysterio, please go back to SmackDown. Fans are throwing up every time you come out. Please go back to SmackDown. And like, it's pretty funny when you think about it, because like, yeah, Triple H got drafted to Raw in April of 2009. Bro, this guy's been on Raw since January. He got beat up on Raw. He's been beating up people on Raw. He saw his wife got clapped on Raw. He was out here doing home invasions on Raw. He's been a part of the Raw roster, guys. But other than Triple H, this one definitely had some pretty important transfers. CM Punk went to SmackDown and so did Jericho. And I remember during this show though that this was the year where it really hit me, and I really began to pray and hope that somehow, some way, John Cena would end up going to SmackDown. So this was during the time where Cena's character was really changing, and he was really entering a super cringe era. And as someone who grew up with him as a rapper, as a cool tough guy, like hustle low to respect chain gang era, in my 11-year-old head, I was like, hey, maybe if he gets drafted to SmackDown, he might become cool again. He might become a rapper again. So this was the year where I watched the entire draft, and every time a pick was selected, I was hoping.
Cena could never go back to being a rapper. He can, but the way since society is now, if he even this heel turn, if he was to go, first of all, the Dr. Thuganomics gimmick for him right now would not fit at all. It's just like society is too sensitive, and it would honestly be cringe for him at his age to be doing that. And it's not fucking 2004, 3, 2, 1, 5 anymore. So it's kind of like, even though it's kind of these past couple years been feeling like a reboot of the 2000s, but for him to come back as a Dr. Thuganomics now, today, or even back then, it wasn't gonna work. Maybe back then it would have worked, but then again, it's like it would have worked back then, but right now, if they was to do it today, it would not work.
I was praying, I'm like, please, it might be Cena to SmackDown. It might be Cena to SmackDown. Sadly, it ended up being the Big Show. It's always Big Show. Ruins everything. It ruins everything every single time. Well, it's fine. Cena to SmackDown didn't happen, but man, I used to pray for it. The 2010 draft was a draft that for some reason I genuinely had zero memories of, and once I went back and watched it, it makes sense why, because nothing of value really happened here. Edge got drafted from SmackDown to Raw, which I had zero recollection of, and I think it's fair because like 5 months later, he's world champion on SmackDown. It was alright, just nothing to really write home about. Even the matches were kind of like, what are we doing here? The last match for the draft pick on this night was Hornswoggle beating Dolph Ziggler. How do you even think of booking that match? But the next year, the 2011 draft, the last draft for 5 years.
Why you push my son like that? Wait, go back. Wait, yo.
How do you even think of booking that match? But the next year, the 2011 draft,
God.
draft
Yo, this was like, get the fuck.
for 5 years. Now this is one I remember, sadly.
This the one.
Draft was a night where when I was watching this and I was witnessing it, I really thought my life was gonna change forever. After years of begging and hoping that maybe one day John Cena would return home to SmackDown and be cool again, it actually happened. The 2011 draft opened with The Big Show. Yes, The Big Show, the most useless wrestler of all time, winning a 20-man battle royal with Kofi Kingston and earning SmackDown a draft pick. And just like every other year when the wrestlers were being shown on the screen and randomized, a tiny part of me was like, please be Cena. And it actually happened. It ended up being John Cena, drafted to SmackDown. I had never in my life been more thankful for The Big Show. If I could have, I would have bought him 30 Big Macs, no problem. It was exactly what I was hoping for years at this point, and it was so shocking, it was so hype, it was so exciting. Cena got drafted to SmackDown in a huge surprise. The crowd was going crazy, and this was something that really felt like could change the company. In my mind, all these thoughts were racing like, wow, there's so many feuds for Cena now. How will he be on SmackDown? Who are they gonna push on Raw as a result of this? And it was legit game changing in every way. And most importantly, as someone who was in my peak preteen I hate Cena now because the internet told me to phase, I thought this was gonna make Cena cool again and not be Barney. But yeah, this draft was awesome at the time. Even though Rey Mysterio got sent back to Raw, by this point the damage had already been done. It didn't matter. Even Randy got drafted to SmackDown, and the main event was a 6-man tag match between The Miz, Punk, and Del Rio versus Cena, Christian, and Mark Henry. And I knew Raw was gonna win this because SmackDown had just been clearing the draft picks, and they had to end off the night by having a star from SmackDown go to Raw. And I was just hoping and praying, like, you know, please be Kane or something. They have the match and Raw wins as predicted, and as the randomizer goes off, the most annoying thing that could have possibly happened happens. Cena gets drafted back to Raw. Nah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This was so stupid. I was so mad. I was legit mad at this point. After years of me secretly hoping for this switch, they had the audacity to do it and then troll us. You know what? Not even troll us, troll me. They had the audacity for me to get flashbacks of Cena on SmackDown, get all excited, get all nostalgic. Wrestling was going to feel right once again. Cena was going to be cool again. They even had Cena put on the damn SmackDown shirt just to take it all away.
Yo, look at his face. He knows for a fact. Like, Cena knew for a fact he was not going to SmackDown. Like, look at his face. He's like, yeah, I'm G this shit out all of y'all right now. Like,
and what really pissed me off with the icing on the cake was when he did get drafted back to Raw, he was all smiling and happy. Oh, look what we have here. I guess I'm staying on Raw. No, bro, we wanted you on SmackDown. Stop smiling. I don't know if it was like this for anyone else. I doubt anyone else really cared if Cena was on SmackDown or Raw, especially in 20.
Nah, in that time, I wanted Cena to stay on Raw. Cena on Raw was better than Cena on SmackDown. I didn't see Cena on SmackDown when I started watching wrestling. I started watching SmackDown first, and then like probably SmackDown first, second grade, Raw third grade. So seeing by the time I started watching SmackDown, like John Cena literally just got shipped off the Raw. So when I found out about Monday Night Raw is how I got introduced to John Cena. So it's kind of like, me personally, I would have rather him have stayed on Raw. But when he got drafted to SmackDown, I was like, damn, he going to the Wax show. And then I was like, oh, he back on the Raw.
2011, but for some reason I did, and this is what they did to me. But jokes aside, it's a pretty funny moment. It is kind of stupid, but hey, I'll allow it. It was actually Vince playing a prank on the USA Network by wanting to troll them and make it seem like he had drafted their biggest draw to another channel for a few hours. So in that case, it's pretty funny. But yo, it definitely broke my heart. I just wanted it to be 2004 again. My bad. But that ended up being the last draft for a while, because after this in mid-2011, the brand split was basically over. After almost 10 years, the brand split was done, and every week it was a free-for-all. Raw became a super show, and SmackDown became even more of a B show that less and less people started watching, and the weekly product, especially SmackDown, just became less and less watchable as time went on. But then, it was 2016, and it was time to run it back. Apparently it was 2002 all over again, and it was time to split the brands one more time from scratch. It was time for a new generation of fans who experienced the brand split and forge bonds with certain wrestlers beyond certain brands. It was time for a new era. Kind of. Sadly, this brand split didn't really last that long compared to the first one, but it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, the 2016 draft was a very special night, just like the ones I just talked about. Back in 2016, I had just graduated high school and I was a really jaded wrestling fan at this point, but they got me hooked, they got me amped. Once they announced the draft and they announced the brand split again, I was back into it. And with Shane and Bryan heading up Tuesdays, Foley and Steph on Mondays, the rosters were drafted, and on this night, both rosters were absolutely stacked. Just by splitting the rosters again, I was back. I'm like, hey, I'm actually gonna watch this next week. And 2016 was probably the last time where a draft really moved me, where I was genuinely excited. After this, you know, we had some shakeups, we had some redrafts, we had a bunch of restarts, but nothing captured the magic like this one did. Either way, the point is, when we were young, when we were naive little kids watching wrestling, when SmackDown and Raw truly felt different, there were very few nights in the year as fun and as exciting as this night. It was such a blast to be a kid and watch draft night. You've seen all the moments, you've seen all the picks. It just felt so special back then, and it's so fun to revisit these nights because once you're older, you know, you kind of forget about the Raw episodes, the SmackDown episodes. You only remember the big moments, right? The pay-per-views and manias. But back in the day when we were kids and we couldn't get every pay-per-view, nights like draft night, they felt like pay-per-views to us. It was a big deal for a wrestler to switch shows. It was a big deal for wrestlers to all be on one show for one night. It was a big deal to get matches like Edge versus Cena on TV. Draft nights were just fun nights. But yeah, in the comments down below, let me know, what is your favorite draft memory? What is your favorite draft night? For me, in terms of draft night itself, I'll say 2008. In terms of overall drafts, I gotta say 2005. But yeah, let me know. Maybe there's some sickos out there that love the 2011 draft because you wanted Cena to stay on Raw. I hate you, but yeah, you never know. Hope you get.
Yeah, he talking about me. He talking about me, definitely. Yo, shout out to Russell Gifts again with the video. And this video was 10 months ago, but I don't know if we're gonna get a draft this year because the transfer window I don't even know if that shit ended, honestly. That shit still probably ongoing. But since they had this transfer window, I don't know if they're gonna do a draft after WrestleMania this year. So we have to wait and see. Appreciate y'all for watching this video. As always, keep doing your thing. Make it make sense. And I'll see y'all in the next video. Safety.